Elizabeth Holmes, the disgraced founder of Theranos, spoke with quite a low and deep voice that was really part of her mystique. And decades earlier, Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister of the UK, famously retrained her voice so that it would sound deeper. So why are these two successful women speaking with lower voices? Today I'm going to be diving into the fascinating phenomenon of women lowering their voices to be taken more seriously in leadership roles. Is it conscious? Is it unconscious? And what does it say about power and gender and how we perceive successful women? So let's start with those two famous cases. Early in Margaret Thatcher's career, she was told that her voice sounded too shrill to be taken seriously as a politician. So she took lessons from Kate Fleming, who was a voice coach at the National Theatre. She worked on deliberately lowering her voice, slowing her speech, in order to convey authority and calm. You can hear the difference if you listen to early footage versus later footage.
I've done a good deal of other speaking, but speaking in the House of Commons is quite different. It's a unique experience.
The only time I didn't support America, when she went into Grenada and we didn't know, and there was a fight between the one communist and another.
And then there's our Elizabeth Holmes. In her case, it's still debated whether or not she purposely lowered her voice. Holmes founded Theranos at age 19 when she dropped out of Stanford, and she quickly rose to tech stardom, which I would say was a fairly male-dominated industry. She would always wear the Steve Jobs black turtleneck, and in all these interviews, she had this very low, deep voice.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I started this company because...
In Hulu's The Dropout, all about Elizabeth Holmes and her rise to stardom, there's a fictionalized scene where Elizabeth is looking in the mirror and consciously lowering her voice. So obviously they're hinting that this was deliberate. Her family says that she always had a low voice and it's kind of a thing in their family. But one of her Stanford professors said otherwise. She said that she never remembered her having that low of a voice.
Those who knew her in college, such as Stanford professor Phyllis Gardner, claimed that Elizabeth Holmes did not have the deep voice back then.
And what about the deep voice? Did she have the deep voice when you were dealing with her?
No. I was shocked when I heard her voice because I'd met her before. That is a voice you don't forget.
And now our dear friend Elizabeth is in the slammer for defrauding investors and all of that great stuff she got into. But there was an interview with the New York Times kind of where before she went to jail. I don't know if it was before or after she was convicted, but in it, the interviewer notes that her voice was not that deep voice anymore, that it was kind of a little bit higher. And there are some videos that show her voice not being that deep.
And we talked to our lab team and they said, okay, you can do the draw. And so they did this, what would have been a finger stick on this little nub on his arm.
Over the last 11 years, we've reinvented the traditional laboratory infrastructure.
As I listen to her voice, it definitely sounds sort of put on to me. Whether or not that matters doesn't matter, but it does sound like she's consciously lowering her larynx. But here's the thing. We all change our voices to a certain extent, depending on the context that we're in. And we do this a lot of times without thinking about it. You might have heard of code switching, which is basically where you change the way that you speak depending on the context and who you're talking to. You probably speak differently in a professional setting than you do with your best friend or your family. So in some ways, what Margaret and Elizabeth did wasn't that unusual, but these are very successful women who wanted to be taken seriously in male-dominated spaces. So it's interesting to just think about why that is. Multiple studies have shown that we tend to associate lower-pitched voices with authority, with competence, and with trustworthiness in both men and women. One study titled "Sounds Like a Winner" found that people preferred political candidates with lower voices because they seemed stronger and more competent. Another study found that blind listeners, people who had never seen the person speaking, rated lower-pitched voices as more trustworthy. So on one hand, obviously, women lowering their voices to be taken more seriously in male-dominated spaces, it's a reflection of sexism. It's the reality that being feminine in those spaces is devalued, that those stereotypical feminine traits might make you seem less trustworthy or less competent. The pressure to sound serious often ends up being translated into sound more like a man. And women shouldn't have to change themselves in order to be respected. On the other hand, I think that you should do whatever makes you feel confident and comfortable in the situations that you're in. There's nothing that we can do in the exact moment that we're in to combat sexism at large. So if speaking with a lower pitched voice or, with a more authoritative voice in that moment makes you feel good, great. And for some people, I think it could be a strategy rather than, the way they have to be. There's a great article from Dazed that I read that I'll link below, and it explores how this is happening all across many different industries. Many women are consciously or unconsciously lowering or deepening their voices in order to be taken more seriously, especially in leadership roles. So the other piece of this is should we even care if women are lowering their voices or not? There probably wouldn't be much media attention on some 21-year-old guy who had a startup and lowered his voice to sound more trustworthy or whatever. Nobody would say anything about it. But I think there's also something, I remember hearing a lot of stuff about Hillary Clinton's laugh, that nobody liked her laugh. And the same thing with Kamala Harris, that, she's got a cackle and she, people didn't like that or whatever, which I just think it's exhausting. But it's just except in the case of that one guy. Do you remember that guy who was yeehaw or something at a political campaign, and it ruined his campaign just because he made that noise? That actually was very funny to me.
We're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
Of course, the two women that ran for president, we're going to be criticizing and picking apart the way they laugh. Really? I don't know. Honestly, every woman is going to feel different about this, whether you're a cis woman, whether you're a trans woman, how important it is in different contexts to be read as more feminine or less feminine, or to be taken more seriously or less seriously, or be goofy or fun, or whatever it is with your voice. There's always going to be room to criticize women's voices. I think there's always going to be people who criticize something about women. Your appearance, the way you sound, whether you're a mother or not, whether you're married. There's so many rules about what women are supposed to be in our society, and I get confused by them. I definitely have internalized stuff about, I should be doing X, Y, and Z because I'm a woman. No, I don't think so. So it's something that I'm always actively trying to work through, I think. And so, if how you're perceived is important to you in professional situations or whatever situations, your voice is going to be part of that. So whatever you choose to do with that information, great. It's none of my business if anybody changes their voice or doesn't change their voice, even though I'm a voice teacher. It's honestly none of my business. Voice is a part of your identity for sure, but it's also performance. It's also can be for the benefit of the perception of other people. So we can all be different people and identify as different people in different settings, or we can also perform in a different way in different settings. But when a voice change is driven by pressure to conform to society, I think it's something to think about. Is that something you want to do or not? Totally fine. Either way. So I hope this video was helpful and thought-provoking, and I would love to hear from you what you think about this topic. Have you ever changed your voice to be taken more seriously? Do you think it's important that we talk about this or not? So drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.